Well, the Maxima has consumed more of my off days than I would have liked it to. We're heading to the parts store. Let me explain why a little bit and talk about a couple of things that I've been noticing happening in several other automotive bloggers, in particular Uncle Tony of Uncle Tony's Garage talks about this very same issue. Most of us go to auto parts stores to buy parts for our vehicles that normally contain some type of warranty, some type of period that the part will be guaranteed for. Usually electronic parts are guaranteed for roughly 1 year, maybe a little less. Some electronic parts, emissions control parts, are guaranteed for a limited lifetime. Needed to purchase a mass airflow sensor, and I talked about, particularly when dealing with a older vehicle, for instance the 98 Maxima that we have here in the stable, and new parts or remanufactured new parts with warranties, as opposed to salvage yard items. So I went to AutoZone, as they had this one item by an outfit whose name I did not recognize. Let me orient that properly. Here we go. I don't know if I can make that out. Here, a BSE or BSC. In looking up the mass airflow sensor for the particular application, I noted that there was no indication of a warranty offered for this remanufactured part. Now, this part is remanufactured by a builder in Mexico. And what I'm telling you folks is the bane of any automotive mechanic's existence, or any do-it-yourselfer that does this with any frequency / regularity. Uncle Tony clearly pointed that out in his videos about parts for vehicles and supply chain problems. These are by no means the problems associated with an AutoZone, O'Reilly, a Napa, because these places do not manufacture these parts. They are just the middleman that sells them to the general public, us. So when I purchased this mass airflow sensor for this vehicle, I inquired to the person at the parts counter about the guarantee, and I quickly asked, what happens if, I said, is there any guarantee? And there was not. So I asked, I said, if this thing starts coding, then I'm out of money. He said, just hold on to the receipt. If you have any problems with it, come back. Well, as you saw in the video where I did the repair along with the radiator fan, I was rushed for time. Started the car ran absolutely fine. Wife drove the car and didn't get around the block before it cut off on her, and the check engine light comes back on. Managed to get the car back home, no issues. And next day, yesterday, my day off from my regular job, I started the car in the driveway at park and noticed that it stumbled. Waited for it to come up to operating temperature, put it in gear. Sat there on the brake, and the car stumbled again. Check engine light, third time it stumbled before I got out of the driveway. And the first corner I got to, which is about a quarter of a mile from my home, the car cut off. Check engine light came on. I had the scan tool with me, of course, plugged in, read the code P0100. Cleared the code. Started the vehicle and drove it around the block again. The same symptoms occurring, running along extremely smooth, then suddenly cutting out. Did it 3 times, 4 times, cut off again. It cut off 4 times in the span of a block, which my block constitutes right at 1.25 miles, making a big circle. So I parked the vehicle and immediately popped the hood, took the part off, went to the auto parts store. They did not have another one in stock. They were able to locate one at another store and then have it shipped to the location 4 miles up the road from where I lived on the next day, which is today. So we are going back to the store to see if they could gift this particular part. Now, this is rambling and long-winded and everything. However, this is the dilemma that you're in when you're dealing with basically an older car, or maybe possibly any vehicle, when it comes to the auto parts stores and available parts. There was only one other store in town that had this exact remanufactured part. When I inquired about the new parts, they were not available from any of the stores. They would have to order them in. Okay, Willie, why didn't you order them from eBay, Amazon? Reading some of the reviews of the $21, $27 items, majority of them were not very good. Some people seem to have had success with them, but you run into the issue of, even with Amazon's mighty next day shipping, even these items were several days out. I wouldn't be able to have gotten one until Thursday. Now remember, we're down to 2 vehicles because the S10's in the garage with rod knock right now. So this is absolutely necessary. So this long rambling thing about going to the auto parts store is to give you folks a primer. Some of you already know this, and if you don't, and if you're here on this channel and you're looking at this, understand what I'm saying. It's not always your mechanic's fault. Supply chains all over seem to be having issues. I mentioned in an earlier S10 thing, I went through 5 removals of the transmission before I got a flex plate, not flywheel, before I got a flex plate that was round. 5 times this transmission came up and down. When I asked for a pair of shims for the S10 starter, the guy at the parts store said, I've never had anybody ask for shims on an S10. And I told him I've never shimmed a starter on an S10 until that day. And right now, this vehicle has shims on it that I'm going to have to remove because the transmission is coming out, because I got to take the engine out. This is all about supply chain. So, parts availability may not be there for particular vehicles, and if you're like me, I kind of deal in the old car hobby, it gets a little bit difficult. So, what I'm saying is, don't blame the people at the parts store. They don't make anything. They sell it to folks like you and me. It's all a supply side thing. And it seems like in this case, maybe the quality is substandard. I mean, look at Ford currently has vehicles parked, brand new vehicles parked awaiting chips because there have been a shortage of electronic chips. And don't forget, the mass airflow sensor is nothing more than an electronic device. So who knows about the quality of it? This one was bad right out of the box and supposed to have been new, remanufactured, not brand spanking new. So we're going to go to the auto parts store, do the exchange, so that I won't be out $101 as opposed to the Delphi $272 and $349. I don't call this No Box Garage for nothing. Now, I ain't broke, but I try to save money where I can. But nobody can afford to be out money for their vehicles. And again, I stand on my reasoning for doing a new or a remanufactured part on an older vehicle like this because of the amount of time saved, not having to run to the salvage yard, not trying to find a quality piece or the same piece, or having to go back and forth to that yard because the piece that you got is bad. You just have no way of telling until you actually get it on your particular vehicle. Anyway, I will come back to you after I get the piece, after I get it on the car, and we'll see if this fix is going to work. Starts no issue. That was a previous scanning, so we need to erase. This particular vehicle takes quite a bit of time to talk back and forth to this code scanner. Finally done. All right. Start it up. We're going to bring it up to operating temperature and see what happens. Now, I pointed out that the issue with the part is definitely not the auto parts store. Again, they don't manufacture anything. One of the things that I did discover in doing the investigation on the part number, and when you know it, it's upside down relative here. Let me see if I can get on that in particular. In the electronic catalog, there we go. Right there is an S extension, but in the electronic catalog, there is an M, as in Mike. Both of these had S extensions on the back of it. So I inquired with the parts manager at the store if that's a superseded number or not, recognizing that many times cross-platform applications may look identical but may be electronically different. In this case, I'm hoping this second one is the charm that does the job on this. Otherwise, I'm going to have to spend considerable amount of money to get a Delphi part or somebody else's part. But these are the issues that you deal with when you're dealing with auto parts stores, supply chain, and all the things that have been going on in this time of pandemic, basically. Workers, supply chain, you name it, all types of issues. So don't be super critical of the people in the parts store. So all you supply chain people, all you manufacturers, get your stuff together.
Here's an epilogue to the Maxima repair that I just completed, that you saw the 3-part series on. Another part failed on the car immediately after replacing the first failed mass airflow sensor. This was the ignition coil. Now the advantage was I was able to test this particular coil with the voltmeter to determine right away that the coil was indeed bad. So I was able to search around at a local parts store and find the part available and replace it. Success. Absolute success. So after a weekend of 3 major parts failing on this car and replacing them, I'm happy to report that the car is functioning as it should and back on the road, and at least I got my wife happy. Okay, but there's some important takeaways that I want to reiterate to you. Number one, again, the parts sellers, the AutoZones, Advances, the O'Reillys, the Napas, the you name it, don't make anything. They are simply resellers. That brings this whole issue of parts and parts availability and even quality down to the level of the supply chain. And presently, that's where all the issues appear to lie. There are only X number of manufacturers of auto parts in this world anyway, be that Mexico, Taiwan, China, the United States. Doesn't matter. Just X number of people making these parts for all the places that resell them. Earlier I mentioned that I had the issue with the flex plate on the S10 with the 4 flex plates that I had to purchase. All of them were made, manufactured, and stamped with the maker's mark from the same manufacturer in Mexico. Your mechanics probably know this. Your part supply people know this. Just because it has a box that says your favorite auto parts store doesn't mean that they made it. Anybody with money can private label and private brand, and that's all this is. So just remember, there are only X number of places in the world that actually remanufacture or manufacture your particular auto part that your mechanic or you is going to place on this vehicle. That brings me to an issue on parts loyalty. A lot of people years and years ago used to be brand loyal, i.e. a particular store or a particular auto parts store. that's kind of gone out the window with the advent of the big chain stores that have taken over the parts market. There are no longer places like, let's just say, Gardner Auto Parts or Todd Auto Parts that used to be located here in Nashville. If you wanted some real specific information on particular vehicles, some of these places were places where people were absolutely loyal to. But now with the big chain stores taking over, you heavy DIYers and your mechanics cannot afford to be brand loyal. And with today's supply chain issues, you absolutely, definitely have to get that concept out of your head and simply find the parts where they are available. And going back to, again, referencing the video, particularly on the older vehicle, that's one of the reasons why I don't shop the salvage yards for the parts for these specific vehicles that I'm driving. It's just too iffy. But once again, if you got the time and you had the inclination, by all means, go out there in the salvage yard and do that. But I'm talking specifically about supply chains and the major auto parts stores. So again, have to get your parts from whatever auto parts store has the parts available. I don't think there's any such thing anymore as brand loyalty. So let your fingers do the searching. Yeah, tap it out on that keyboard to find out what store has your parts. So while we're talking about the parts store, understand something, please. As a former parts counter person, parts people know more than you think they do. Some don't. The computers, in a lot of cases, make these people seem extremely knowledgeable. And they may not know how to fix your car, but they know what part to look up based on the information that you give them. They're not always mechanics, so don't expect them to know what your part needs based on your particular incomplete description of what may be happening. They're not all mechanics. And especially when it comes to the younger kids, when it comes to a lot of the older cars and older parts, I'm sorry, they're lost. They don't know about points in condensers and carburetors and things of that nature. Find yourself an experienced parts person who has some pretty good knowledge and deal with them. Other than that, don't give the parts person a hard time. I am not defending all parts people, because we all know there are people behind the counter that are, face it, assholes. They have no business being behind the counter at all. Weed them out. Ask for someone else. Just don't deal with them when they're complete. Anyway, not defending any parts person's bad actions. And no, I'm not going to deal with that guy on Nolansville Road, for instance. Yeah. So, those are just some of the takeaways from my experience from last week in dealing with the 98 Maxima repair. And I just wanted to bring some of that to you. Now remember, I mentioned if you want to find out any other information from somebody even more knowledgeable than myself, go over to Uncle Tony's Garage over on his site, and I'll try to figure out how to put a link somewhere in there to his particular site, or just go to Uncle Tony's Garage. Guy knows a lot and will impart a lot of wisdom to you about this particular issue, and particularly about anything that has to do with automobile repairing and his own personal knowledge. I'm not sponsored by him, of course, but he's one of the people that I do follow and that I look at regularly and count on his knowledge and expertise when it comes to a lot of the stuff that I do, and I enjoy listening to him, so maybe you could get something from him as well. So that's it. The Maxima's done. Yes. And we are turning the corner in the weather next week. It's going to be glorious in terms of temperatures in the 80s, with next Saturday temperature coming down to just 78 degrees. So we're going to be back outside in the garage doing some work on the S10 and maybe on the Mustang too. So you stay tuned. Come back and like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. This is where they just reminding you folks I'm trying to get everything out of like that. I can't because I'm running on borrowed time. Stay safe, everyone.